every thought you have creates its own reality. It's like the thing you choose not to do fractions off and becomes its own reality, and just goes on from there.
Okay, Matt.
Hello.
This is your episode. Hands down, this is all you.
Yeah, no, carry on.
I was just going to say, we're doing multi-narratives, which is your specialty this week.
Yes.
So I am just going to hand straight over to you so that you can tell us what multi-narrative is.
What the bloody hell is it all about?
Yeah, what is it? And give us a few examples.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say, actually, that I realised it's been 9 years since I started looking at this at uni.
Oh, God. Time goes quick.
And although I'm not working on it at all, I think about it every day, and I think that's testament to the intricacy of the films and how open-ended they can also be. In terms of what do we mean by a multiple narrative film, and why is it worthy of a topic of discussion, I've just put together a little bit of a brief. Basically, what do we mean? Multiple narrative is essentially two or more storylines that coexist within the same film. They can share the same space or the same time frame. The characters might be related, or it might be strangers and they might pass each other, or it could be completely detached. They might be episodes, completely separate stories, or it might be an anthology film. But either way, you can take the stories out and they will always operate independently. You could watch them in isolation. They wouldn't be very long, but you could take them out.
Yeah.
By putting stories side by side, what happens is you're forced to compare them as a viewer. It's a sort of subconscious thing that will happen, especially because you get less time to spend with each story. By consequence, our focus is turned to what the stories are collectively about. So under what thematic umbrella do they all belong to? And that's what this narrative structure does. It's like a thematic lens. I came up with something that I thought was quite appropriate. It's like when you, in science at school, you would shine light through that glass prism, and all the colours of, the rainbow colours would be on the other side. It's a bit like that. It's like shoving a story through this structure, and at the other side you see the entire spectrum of human experience on the other side, which is very profound. I'm aware of that sounds a little bit out there. So these films present a microcosm of experiences or a slice of life that push us to look at the bigger picture, like a mosaic or a puzzle, with humanity always as that common denominator. So why do it? What's the purpose? And the only thing I can really put it down to is that these films are capable of examining the human condition. That's very broad. They're all meditations on philosophical, religious questions about the meaning of life, morality, mortality, chance, fate, karma, all those things, and the idea of connectedness, and specifically what impact do our actions and choices have on the lives of others. And that's where these interconnecting storylines really come into play. Completely unrelated to this, I was watching a video of a deaf comedian in the US from about 20 years ago on YouTube, and she said something, and I thought, I've got to put that in the episode. She said, "You'll come into the world alone, you will leave alone. The people you meet in between is the challenge of how you deal with your life." And I thought that's perfect. That sums up what these films are really about. And I'm getting there, I promise. So the fragmented nature of these films and the structures inherently keep you at a distance as a viewer. You're never allowed to get too engaged in the narrative because you're always sort of flitting around. And it's done purposefully, really, because it's designed to make you always evaluate your own life and apply what the overall theme of the film is onto yourself. And it's a bit like the film might lure you in at the beginning, chew you up a bit along the way, and at the end it will always spit you back out into the real world, as if to say, so what are you going to do about it? So they always have this sort of parable feel about them, like it's a moral story and you're meant to take away from it. And then, just lastly, and I'm sorry, I know I'm rambling, to what degree can these films be considered their own genre? And that was a lot of the focus of my work at uni. It's a complicated one because the stories in the film themselves have genres of their own. So it's quite outrageous to be suggesting that there's a new genre. People you don't just create a new genre, but it's like a meta genre.
It's like, a subgenre,
that sort of encompasses the rest of them. And I thought, well, no film can explore themes in this way without this structure. They deliberately foreground theme over story and character, which is opposite to what you'd expect any other film to do. It deliberately distances you as an audience. These films seem to have the same codes and conventions and characteristics that have been changed and developed over time, which other films don't have.
Yeah.
So I'd say, if the effect and the purpose of a film is unique, I think it's worthy of considering as its own genre of cinema. Like I said, it's quite profound. Some academics might be very upset with that and say, no, it's just a narrative structure. But I don't know. I firmly believe that they are belonging to their own group of films. And that leads us on to what we're going to do in this episode, really. We've taken some key examples of films from different eras of cinema. Obviously, we're going to review them as normal, but we're specifically going to be looking at how they introduced and adapt different formal techniques and structural techniques and stylistic techniques, and the effect that was produced by them in terms of the themes that were explored and what they were trying to say about society and politics and whatnot at the time that they were made. I hope that makes sense. you can tell me if that made no sense whatsoever. I suppose so. I thought I'd introduce the films we're going to do now. If you wanted to skip ahead, we're going to be covering Grand Hotel from the Hollywood studio era, Nashville from the New Hollywood, and then quite a few from the 1990s independent movement, because there's so many types. So we're going to do Slacker, Run Lola Run, Magnolia, and Time Code. And then we're going to look at the 21st century with Love Actually and Contagion. We've done Cloud Atlas already.
We have.
So you can go back and listen to that.
Full episode, completely in depth on that one.
Oh, so in depth.
Definitely recommend that one.
Yeah, so that's episode 20 if you wanted to go back and listen to that one at the end. But otherwise, enough of me. We're going to go first into the earliest, the Hollywood studio era and Grand Hotel.
We are.
With you, Mary. I'll just let you go.
Okay, so Grand Hotel, it came out in 1932. We're talking the very beginning of cinema, really. Sound only came out in 27, so we're only 5 years later. There's no colour. We're in the early stages of cinema here. So a lot of what they were doing was new. They were inventing these new ways of doing things and how to make films and all the different ways that we know so well now. They were being invented at this point.
It's easy to forget that stories didn't already. Well, stories existed, but actually telling them through pictures was in this way
in
wasn't
its
really
early
done.
stages. Which is why I was so impressed watching this, because it really does hold up. It's very impressive what they've managed to do here for the time, because you didn't really see this done in terms of the structure of it. So this is really eye-opening, I think, for the time, and it is very impressive. So Grand Hotel, basically, it's very simple story. It is literally just following a group of guests at the Grand Hotel at this specific time, and you're looking at different classes, different things that are going on with people, how they mix, different characters meet, things like that. So it's really a very, very straightforward plot. So the movie starts with characters being connected to different places. So it's all on the phones, you see, and all the wires. When you used to have receptionists who used to have to plug you into people to different places. Exactly. And you find out different things about these characters. You see characters pass each other. Some talk to each other and interact. Some have larger interactions, some only a few words, some don't meet at all. That's what you're looking at. And I think most films that we'll be looking at have that kind of structure as well. Some of them have relationships, others won't meet at all. That's what you kind of do find in these. I think the camera movement, especially at the beginning, in the foyer of the hotel, the camera kind of wanders. So you're picking up different characters. It's showing you who to look at, basically. Some characters meet for the first time. Others already know each other, or they've worked for each other or they're working for each other. For instance, you've got Joan Crawford in here, and she's paying a secretary to another character. She's having interactions with John Barrymore's character, and you've got all of these other people meeting. John Barrymore's character meets Lionel Barrymore's character, and so you've got all of these people interacting with each other. Greta Garbo is in this movie, and I've not seen Greta Garbo in a movie before. I know all about her. I've heard loads about her.
Yeah.
But she plays one of the main characters in this. I can't even say her name. Grusinskaya.
Yeah, she's a ballerina.
Yes, she is. Yeah. And she's a focal point. She has many admirers and many people who surround her, working for her, getting her to work. She is having quite a few issues, and she's surrounded by these, I would say, aides, really, secretaries, people who are going to get her there, get her to work. They're intent on getting her to dance because she's going to make them money. Cause and effect is a fairly big one in this one.
Yes.
The Baron, played by John Barrymore, he needs money, so he designs to steal this pearl necklace from Greta Garbo's character, which is how he meets her, and they fall in love in about 5 seconds flat, as they always do in the older movies. It's like 2 minutes, bam, in love. And I'd say for this one, what I noticed about this film is money is the main focal point for all the events. So the Baron needs money, so he turns to theft. You've got Fleischmann. She needs money. She's willing to put herself in a horrible position for it. Then you've got Praising's business is in financial trouble, so he's lying about deals to try and get things through, to get him back on track. Then you've got Lionel Barrymore's character, and he's dying, so he decides to live well with all of the money he has left. For as long as he has left, he's just like, yeah, okay, just splash it out. He doesn't think he has long to live, so he's just gonna spend it, enjoy it. And then you've got this ballerina. She has no money issues at all, but all of those around her are intent on getting her to work so that
to make money.
They can make money for themselves off of her.
That's a great example, actually, of that glass prism thing. So we're sort of firing the theme of money in, and we're seeing the different, not everybody's in difficulty, like you say. One of them's actually having a great time, but it gives you that spectrum of everybody.
You're also seeing class. The class of the time. You've got those who are in a good social position, and you've got those that are more working class. Joan Crawford's very much a working class girl. She's a secretary. She's getting any job she can get to work, to live. And then you've got Lionel Barrymore, who actually works for Wallace Beery's character. He plays the general director, and so he's just a pleb, basically, while you've got this general director who, yes, is in financial trouble, but he's from a completely different class. So that you get a very interesting view there. And I think in terms of structure, it is very much a simple one. You're just following the time. And you're just skipping from character to character and seeing what's happening. And there are a lot of interactions, so it does just play very simply like a normal narrative. You don't feel like you're jumping all over the place.
Which is typical of the time period.
Exactly. They didn't kind of go into very in-depth, very difficult, more complex narratives yet.
No, not quite.
It was a bit early for that. What I would say in terms of what I want to leave it on, I found it very interesting. The very end of this, you've got a death and then a life. So it's almost like it's saying the very end of this movie that life goes on. You've got old guests leaving, but new guests are arriving. So everything kind of refreshes. So you've just seen this little microcosm of a time in the hotel. And then they all leave and new guests arrive, and you're going to have a whole new thing starting. So that very much ends. You do end on a death, and then one of the characters from the very beginning, his wife has a baby. So somebody's died, but then you've got a brand new life coming into it. And I just thought that was a really quite a profound message.
Yeah, I think in a way the hotel is just a metaphor. Like it's just
Yeah.
the building is just a metaphor of life and what happens in life. And I think one of the things I really like is the set design, because the reception area is a complete circle,
Yeah.
and the staircases go around in a complete circle, and the revolving door goes in a complete circle,
Yeah.
and you get that kind of sense of circularity and, like I say, circle of life
Yeah.
feel to it.
Absolutely. And I feel like that is the way a hotel is, isn't it? Like when
Yeah,
you go
pretty
to a
much.
hotel,
Yeah.
it isn't real life. You're like living this like little other life that's not yours. You might be in more luxury than you used to, or it's completely out of your settings. You know, it's not real life. You've got this just short period of time, and then you leave, go back to your life, and new people are going to arrive and be in the room you were just staying in. It does
I like
fit.
it.
It does work.
A lot of these films, they do have very clever. I guess it is symbolism. They take certain things and to make a comment about something else. The other thing I liked is the. I think he's a doctor. There's a character who he's a permanent resident. I think I've not seen it for a while.
Yeah.
Sorry. And he sort of acts as a narrator on what's going on, even though he's just stood talking to himself. And at the very end, he said, "Grand Hotel. People come, people go. Nothing changes." And I like that.
Exactly. And that's what they've just summed up in that message. Like, it's all going to be refreshed, but how much of it is going to actually just be played out again, pretty much.
Yeah, with that common denominator of humanity again.
Yeah, absolutely.
You touched on it with the class as well, that the films have a special way of leveling out differences between people.
Yeah.
And they're all just treated as equal in a way. They might be very different characters, but ultimately there's no hierarchy in a multi-narrative film.
The setting of the hotel does that.
Yeah.
They're all just guests. Yeah. So I was very impressed with it. I was very impressed with it for the time. I thought for 1932, they're really like playing at their A game there.
And it won Best Picture, of course. It was I think it's one of two multi-narrative films that have won. Crash shouldn't have won, but it did.
Yeah, it shouldn't have.
So that's the only example I can really find of a multiple narrative film in the studio era. There was one in the silent era back in 1916, but then we sort of move on. So this is after the studio system collapsed, and we got this new Hollywood. They're much more... they're just different.
They're very different.
There's no rules anymore, really.
Yeah, the rules have gone out the window. The structure of building a film, of making a film, that had gone. It was this completely new era of directors come in the 60s and broke all of the rules, basically.
No big stars either, really. And no
they
big
rewrote
sets.
cinema in a way. The look of the films, what they were doing with the camera, what they were making, even the subject matter, everything changed.
Yeah, and it was at a time, 60s, 70s, we're talking really radical political unrest and paranoia and conspiracies and disillusionment, and a counterculture of people was, developing, and we did see things like location shooting and other things with genre, which is a very good segue into the film I'm going to start with for this era, 1975. This is Nashville, directed by Robert Altman, who directed loads of films like this. He was like the father of multi-narrative films.
Now, I've not seen this.
It's very clever. There's actually there's lots of people in it. Shelley Duvall's in this, Jeff Goldblum, Lily Tomlin, Geraldine Chaplin, massive ensemble cast. And it starts quite weirdly, a bit like the narrator in Grand Hotel. All these films have some kind of prologue and epilogue, and it opens and it's like an infomercial, and it's a mock vinyl album of all the songs that are in the film. I'll explain it. It's a sort of musical, and it's like 24 of your favorite stars in Nashville, and so it does this, and it doesn't introduce them as characters. It introduces them as the actors. So already you're made to think the artifice is here. Like, I know this isn't real.
Yeah.
And it's got the songs going up the side of the screen and stuff. It's unusual, but it's done for a purpose. And as I say, 24 main characters. And it's set over 5 consecutive days leading up to a big political rally in Nashville. And you see everybody on each of these days. And the film kind of just goes through a series of events or locations, really. At the beginning, there's a country music star in a recording studio. Then there's a scene at an airport. And then there's a scene after the airport where there's a traffic incident, and then the scene with the hospital, and it just sort of keeps moving, and all these 24 people just seem to be perpetually just roaming around.
Yeah.
And in terms of how they're all linked, there's a few ways they do it. There's a couple of characters who very specifically almost meet everybody. There's one, I think her name's Opal, and she's from the BBC, so she's come over and she's doing a documentary on Nashville. And she's like perpetually like trying to interview people and understand this interesting world of country music. And then Jeff Goldblum plays this man. He doesn't speak, but he just travels around on a motorized tricycle. And the camera kind of follows him sometimes and links you to a new person. So the camera, does do its own thing. It sometimes picks people out in a crowd. It meanders again, like with Grand Hotel. The sound mixing on this is interesting because everyone was now like radio mic'd. So you could dip in and out. Even in post-production.
He did MASH as well, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Which was for the time, everybody thought it was very different because people were speaking over each other, and you could it was no right, you talk, then they talk, then you talk. It was all it was like real life, talking over each other, and everything was going on, and you just picked up what he decided you were going to pick up on.
Yeah, there's an element of obviously them guiding us through a story, but what essentially happens is, unlike classical films, there's not really a story. It's a loose plot structure. There's no crucial events or information that are highlighted to us particularly. The dialogue's conversational, but what we get, and like you say, it's that atmosphere that it creates, and the meaning comes through that as the mosaic comes together. Another thing I should say is the editing here. So you might have people in completely different spaces, but they're joined together. So there's one morning, I assume it's a Sunday morning, and you see at least 3 different examples of people in church, and it will cut between them and juxtapose them and things like that. It just gives that sense of the real diversity of the people. But in terms of what it's trying to say, and this is where genre, I think, really comes in, because Robert Altman was really well known for just blending and fusing different genres together that you wouldn't expect to. He did it with The Long Goodbye and MASH, McCabe and Mrs. Miller are all good examples. So because they invert your expectations of the genre, they actually are all a bit allegorical. You get the feeling that they're about something else. He's trying to make a point about something. So in this one, it is a musical film, and it's also a political sort of thriller, not a thriller, but along those lines of the kind of films you'd get in the 70s, blended to the point where you don't actually know which one's which anymore. And I'm trying to explain this. So everywhere, like throughout the film, you've got posters of concerts mixed with election campaign posters, almost as if they're the same thing. You get country music fans waiting for their favourite star, but they're waving election flyers. Or you get schoolgirls baton twirling, but it's with guns, and you just get this sort of feeling that hang on a minute, something is not right. You get that feeling, and that's another thing that takes you out the story. And it happens all the way through. So people making speeches is hardly any different from singers singing songs. The country music stars are no different from politicians. The concert stage is no different from a rally podium. And these two industries, in the end, feel absolutely the same thing. And the more it goes on, the more you realise that they're just rooted in the same superficial values of self-promotion, commercialism, and they're all oblivious to what's actually happening in the real world. And obviously we're talking the time of Watergate, Vietnam, JFK's assassination.
Yeah, there was a lot going on in America at that point.
And just something I thought was interesting as well, you never actually see the politician whose rally it is that the whole thing builds up to. It's just like the country music stars in the film, that politicians are just this constructed image, rather than being real people. But what you do hear and see is his campaign wagon, which is another thing that joins everyone together, because it just roams the streets perpetually, just sort of blaring about everything that's wrong with America and all of his policies and stuff, but you never actually meet him. I just think that's really interesting. So yeah, you get this strong undercurrent all the way through of like uncertainty. You just get that sense that this is an America that's lost its way. It doesn't know what its national identity is, and Nashville is used as that metaphor for America as a whole.
Yeah.
And yeah, the music itself I think is interesting, because country music is actually inherently quite sad. I think there's a lot of singing about troubles. And even the optimistic ones kind of imply that something had to have been wrong in the first place in order to have to look forwards to something better. I think it's really, really clever choice of of what he did. And there's a theme, almost like an anthem, that keeps coming back round, and it's a song called "It Don't Worry Me." People sing it a lot, and it's like, oh, that's sad, sad for people. And just to finish off, just to give you an example of what some of the characters are like, and how disillusioned they are with everything that's right in the world. There's a father who hasn't learnt sign language to communicate with his own deaf children.
That's
Shelley,
nice.
no. Shelley Duvall plays a young woman. She's visiting Nashville because her aunt is ill, but she does everything but go and visit her. She's too preoccupied with chasing the musicians around and, getting him to bed with them. There's a suspicious character in an army uniform. We don't know why. There's a musician who's coming from out of town with a guitar case, but he never takes it out. There's loads of wannabe country music stars, like it's their last resort, like it's a dream that's an illness to them, that they have to be validated. Even Elliot Gould and Julie Christie cameo as themselves in the film. Another thing that just takes you out of it. So just to finish, sorry, it's one of those. It's 24 characters, it's hard. Right at the very end, and I'll try not to spoil too much, but there is a politically motivated assassination attempt, this sort of climax. But it's not a politician who is shot at. And you don't get an epilogue in this. It's very open-ended. But the irony of it is that this political rally that it's all been built up to turns into a public sing-along of "It Don't Worry Me," and it ends. And there's this crowd of people, the everyday people, no longer the actors or the characters, but us. It could be us in that crowd. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things. So yeah, sorry if I'm rambling again. There's so much. Just turn the page. So going into the 1990s. This is really, really interesting. I like this, obviously. So this is around the time that independent films were getting really, really, really big. It's Generation X. We've got this youth counterculture very firmly established.
Yeah, again, there was big changes to cinema.
Massive, yeah. As a result of the changes that have been made in the world, and mostly it's to do with pop culture, multimedia. We're talking
MTV era.
MTV era, pretty much, yeah. MTV, home video, TVs, consumerism, all these things meant that we started to experience the world differently, and especially time differently, because all of a sudden now you can stop, pause, rewind, skip forward, skip back. The world is becoming digital. It was getting there. So what we're about to see in the films, and the reason we picked so many independent films, is because they could do so much now, especially with time and modularity. Things didn't have to go linearly in a straight line anymore. The films that we're about to talk about demonstrate how the filmmakers were almost trying to express the unpredictable nature of the modern world.
Yeah.
And I'm really sorry. It's me first. I'm going to go to Slacker, which was by Richard Linklater, who you might know from School of Rock or something.
Yeah. I wasn't going to say School of Rock. I was thinking people would know more for Boyhood. But
yes, Boyhood. You did Boyhood. Yeah. I thought it was 1991. I've read somewhere it's also 1990. I think it depends on where you were. But it's a very, very small indie, low budget film. It's almost shot like a documentary. It's got that feel to it. And it's 24 hours in Austin, Texas, which is where Richard Linklater's from. And it starts very abruptly. And you think, oh, no prologue on this one. Debatable. Because what happens is Richard Linklater plays the first character that you get. And he's got off a bus, he's arrived in Austin, and he gets in a taxi, and he is rambling to the taxi driver, seemingly talking no sense whatsoever about a dream he had on the bus. But actually, this is the director telling us directly to us, not to the taxi driver. He's speaking through the front windscreen at us, really, telling us what the film's going to be. And it's all this idea of parallel universes. And he says, every thought you have creates its own reality, and the things you choose not to do fracture off and become their own realities. He uses the example of the Scarecrow and Dorothy at the crossroad. And he said, basically, they could have gone in any direction, and we only saw one reality. And then he also mentioned things like occasionally you can dream about other realities that you didn't do. And he says, yeah, like, for example, I had this dream, and there was a car accident, and I was in a phone booth, and you think nothing of it.
Yeah.
And he gets out of the taxi. He's at a crossroads. And what should happen but someone gets knocked down in a traffic accident, and then he goes to a phone booth to pick up the phone. So and that's where we leave him. But
Yeah.
it's dropped that sort of idea now of how it's going to happen, and we're left at this crossroads. So the hit and run car goes one way, there's a jogger coming from another way, there's a few pedestrians coming from other ways, and it's like, well, so who do we follow next? And the answer is, well, the film follows whoever the hell it wants to. Obviously, it's predetermined, but it's simulating randomness, random chance encounters, and that's how the film goes. So there's roughly 100. I think there's about 102 characters in the film that just keep going and going and going and going and going, and you never stop following it. It's like you just follow all the way around the city, in and out across this day, and yeah.
So do you only see them once, or do you keep coming back to them and seeing their story develop?
Just the once. Yeah.
Wow.
It's like you're passing them on the street yourself, or you're just overhearing them for a bit and you move on. And there's no real clear links between them usually, but you kind of get the sense that the reason everybody's meeting like this is because they are just wandering. They're just wandering. Sorry if you can hear a Hoover. So what kind of people do we have? They're all mostly unemployed, intellectuals, philosophers, political, paranoid, conspiracy theorists, pretentious artists, band members, bums, no-hopers, pop culture obsessed people, criminals, radicals, verbalists. You can call them so many things, and they do a lot of talking and not a lot else. But it is quite satirical. Like Richard Linklater knows that he's commenting on the relationship that young people have with each other and with the world that they're a product of. He says right at the end, I say he says, it's written right at the end of the credits, so it's easy to miss. He says that this story was based on fact. Any similarity with fictional events or characters is purely coincidental. So who do we get? We get one person who's obsessed with the NASA moon landings and missing people. Another person's obsessed with JFK theories. One person
might have to watch it for this. That sounds like right up my street.
Honestly, it's funny and very clever. You got someone who collects televisions because he claims that they have some kind of psychic power, and that he experiences life through TVs better than he could in real life because he can stop and go back and see it all again. There's a woman trying to flog Madonna's pap smear on the street. There's someone who claims that Scooby-Doo teaches kids about bribery because of Scooby Snacks, and there's a shoplifter, and someone says, "Oh, I know her. She's in my ethics class," and it keeps on going. And there's these bizarre caricatures of people with no names in the credits. They're all just named "Man on Bus," Madonna's pap smear. All these different ones, and it goes on and on and on. But they're fundamentally all just disillusioned with life and government and authority.
Sounds like America now.
A little bit. Well, I think it always has been. I think it's no different from Nashville, really. It's that was 20 years before, but it's the same. It's the same
issues
fundamental
keep coming
message.
round.
Yeah, history repeating itself, and again, that's something that will come up. Yeah, and it's all because of this onslaught of information that people have access to now. They're conditioned to believe everything that they see and hear and read and watch, but they believe in none of it. So it's just like they're just sort of lost, meandering, hanging out, because that's all they can do. So anyway, I'm going to stop. That's Slacker. I think it's quite funny. I really do enjoy that one. Sorry, I'll shut up. I'm going to shut up now. Sorry.
Okay, so our next one, Run Lola Run, which is a German film. I was thinking about this last night, actually, and it reminds me of the MTV era. It actually it's got this feel for it, like it uses animation and things in a funny way. It's got Franca Potent in it as the main character, Lola. And the main gist of this, again, it's very simple, actually. There's not a lot going on. Basically, Lola gets a call from her boyfriend at the beginning, Manny, and he's in a phone booth, and he was doing some dodgy dealings with a pretty shady guy. He'd gone and got, I think they're diamonds or something, he's swapped over for cash, and he leaves the bag of cash on a train because he's an idiot, basically. He leaves it on a train, and a tramp basically picks it up, and he's gonna die because there's 100,000 marks, as they are in Germany, that he was supposed to deliver by 12 o'clock, and he's just dead, basically. So he rings Lola, he's panicked and needs help. So she runs basically everywhere. So her decision is to run to her dad, get help, and it kind of follows what happens from there. It's very, very clever, I suppose, in what it does if you think about it and actually analyze it. So it's all starting with a ticking clock, okay, and a pendulum. The clock bleeds into this pacey score, which pretty much carries on for the majority of the film, really.
Music by Tom Tykwer, who directed it and co-directed Cloud Atlas as well.
That leads to people. You see a load of people in a crowd, and the footage is all sped up. So the emphasis is all on time. Time is your focal point here, completely based on time. And the footage when it's starting on these people, it's kind of covered with like a yellow haze. You're not seeing anybody properly.
They're almost in like a purgatory, isn't it? It's like a no space.
And then it clears and focuses on a person, and you see that person clearly just for a second, and then it moves on back to the haze, and this is repeated, and you see, and these are all characters that are part of the story, whether in a big way or in a very small way, whether it's just people that you see in passing. You're then shown almost like a mug shot of the person and the names in the title credits at the beginning. Like I say, this emphasis on time, clocks are a huge part of this as well. Watches, all the time, and the music as well. That kind of also works with the pace as well. It's all pace, always moving, always ticking, running. Hence the title. It's complete movement all the time. Like I said, there's this MTV feel to it. There's animation used in some of the parts of it. There's Polaroid photos, which I thought was really interesting. Now, what I'm going to say here, this leads into what makes this film so clever. There's only one small part of the plot here, and it's exactly what I described to you at the beginning. However, the actual narrative structure of the film, it shows you that scenario and how that plays out. And then it goes back to the very beginning when the phone is put down, and it shows the scenario again, but how it could have played out differently. And this is where the Polaroid photos are quite interesting. So every time, well, not every time, but most times when one of the characters interacts with someone, usually Lola, it shows you like a series of Polaroid shots of what is going to happen to them in like the near future.
It's like that parallel universe that then springs off from every action you have.
Yeah, so you see this, she's passed as a woman with a pram. Horrible woman, by the way. Not very nice at all. And you see her losing her baby, basically, seeing a period of things and then her baby being taken away from her and stealing another child. And then when you see it the second time, you see them winning the lottery. And then the third time you see her becoming really churchy, starting to pray and going out and handing leaflets out and things like that.
All because of a tiny nanosecond of an interaction with a person.
Yes, just a slight difference to the scenario, which is really interesting. So the first time, I don't know how spoilerific to be with this one. So the first time you see the scenario play out and Lola dies, but then she doesn't want to do that. So she's just like, stop. So then it goes to this, it's almost like a link scene. And that link scene is a scenario I've called it the red screen. So it's all red filtered, and the Manny and Lola are lying in bed, and it shows them discussing an important thing, an important image. So for Lola, it's, do you love me? And then for Manny, it's what would you do if I died? The second scenario, Manny dies. And it's, I would say chance plays a big part of this, as well as timing. Obviously, timing's the key, but it's also chance is what happens in that particular moment. A character who's driving a car and he's about to come out of you can't see, it's kind of coming from between two buildings, and Lola's running in front of the car. The first time she misses it, the second time she runs over the top, the third time she hits it.
Yeah.
And because of that chance, the first 2 times he hits another car because she ran in front of him and he's not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
The third time she hits the car, which means that the car he hit passes.
Yeah.
So it's all chance and time and how that microsecond can make so much difference.
Yeah.
Some of the characters in this one, they do meet. So in the first 2 scenarios, they don't. But in the third scenario, so the man on the bike meets the tramp, and Lola speaks to the man driving the car, and the man in the car knows her dad. So they meet. Manny speaks properly with the blind woman. Different cars smash up. So there's different, it all changes depending on this scenario. And the plot structure is so important to this film. It really is. And the story that it's telling, it's all plot structure. And seeing this, and I have to admit, I had to watch this when I was at college for our foreign language film section.
Yeah.
And I really didn't like it. At all. I think I've grown a bit. I've added a whole star on.
Oh, good.
And I do appreciate it much more for what it does.
I think it's just fun.
It's not my type of film, I have to admit. And I'm glad it was short. It's a very short film. It's an hour and 15 minutes long. I mean, it really is a short film, this one. But it is clever. There's like certain things that are repeated. Obviously, the clock. I don't know why, but her scream. She screams once in each scene, and it's what that does, and it smashes glass, and that's a repeated theme.
That part there is interesting because you say it's all like chance events, but you do get this sort of feeling that she's learning from each run that she's done. It starts changing from, oh, hang on, what's chance and what's design and what's supernatural and what's natural. And that's another thing that, again, these 90s films are really good at doing.
Yeah, I would definitely give it a go because it's different.
It's so different.
It's such a different plot structure, narrative structure. It's worth seeing just to experience it.
It's so funny. I tried to think about all these other ones have like a deep meaning at the end of it, and I thought, what could possibly this one be?
Yeah, it doesn't so much as some of the other ones.
Eventually, because she does do a successful run, it kind of made me feel like maybe it's trying to say that we're in control of our own fates. You know what I mean? It is about our actions and inactions that we're in control fundamentally. Chance isn't really a thing if you can navigate it well. And I should say that this is the closest film I think ever I've seen to a video game. Literally, if your character dies, you go back to the start and you do it again. It's fantastic.
No, it's definitely worth a watch because it is different. What the kind of experience it gives you, it is definitely worth seeing just to experience that.
Very good. We're staying in the 90s.
We are.
This one, I'll admit, it is a bit of an outlier because it's not playing with time, but I couldn't not use this example. This is Magnolia from 1999, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. It's much more mainstream in the aesthetic and even in terms of cast. It's a big, well-known cast of actors, but it's a brilliant, if not the best example for looking at just the multitude of clever, creative choices with structure and theme. So this one starts a bit like Run Lola Run, a bit like Grand Hotel, a bit like Slacker, a bit like Nashville, with a prologue. And there's an unseen narrator, we just hear them, asking us to consider the meaning of 3 urban legends. They're all meant to be examples of surreal coincidence or matters of chance. But ultimately he concludes that strange things happen all the time, so how can they be chance? He plants that seed at the beginning. And this does set up the main theme of the film, really. And something that's intrinsic to multi-narrative films, as we've seen, and that's the line between things that are random or natural and the possibility that other forces might be involved, like, things are predestined or fate or designed. So then we get like a second prologue, like an introduction to all the characters, which is, like I said, it's much more of a mainstream network structure of people, linear. The title of the film is meant to be in reference to the overlapping petals of a magnolia flower, just so you know. So we get this montage to the song One is the Loneliest Number, and we sort of see them mostly in their relationship to television. Again, TVs are everywhere, and I don't think there's a single scene that doesn't have a TV in. and even more in particular in relation to a fictional quiz show, this long-running quiz show called What Do Kids Know? So we see the dying producer of the show, Earl, his struggling wife, Linda, who's played by Julianne Moore, his nurse, Phil, who's played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, his estranged son, Tom Cruise. So that's like one pocket of people. And then you've got the host of the show, his drug-addicted daughter, her relationship with a good-hearted policeman played by John C. Reilly, and then that's another pocket. And then you've got another pocket of people. You've got this boy genius contestant currently on the show called Stanley, and then you've got a former winner of the show who has since lost everything, who's played by William H. Macy, who I love. I never see him in enough things. So you've got this feeling of a network all around this one quiz show. So the rest of the film takes place over the course of one day where this episode's going to be filmed, the final, but it's segmented into chapters that are titled with weather updates. It's going to be so hard to explain this. And these weather updates symbolically reflect the psychological state of all the characters in that block.
Right.
And also the changes in tone and the pacing and intensity. So I'll give some examples. So you get a title and it says partly cloudy, 82% chance of rain. So things are on the cusp. You feel like weather might be getting bad. And this is where the development of all the characters and the context behind their connections becomes much clearer, and the common themes between them, especially in this film, it's cross-generational family issues, especially estranged parents or children as a result of infidelities and other things that have left people with regrets and lonely. Another one is light showers, 99% humidity, winds. And again, this is where the climax is like coming along, and it's all around the TV studio at this point, and all the problems come to a head, and this intense, very intense climax as a result of people not facing the past or learning from their mistakes, and so they've allowed history to repeat itself. And then you get a complete stop, and it's rain clearing, breezy overhead, and it's a moment in the story where all the characters are forced to make a decision. It's like the moment of truth. And yeah, it's a bit bizarre, but there is a montage at one point where they're all singing along to a song. It's actually not cheesy. It's done really well. Another song by Amy Mann, who did most of the soundtrack, and it's called Wise Up, and it's this moment before they have to make the decision they're going to make. So up until that point, it's like the universe, by way of the weather, a natural phenomena, has actually been forcing the characters to get into the physical and emotional position they need to be in to make this decision, and then the rest is up to them to do. Or maybe it's just by chance. I don't know. And then it's not really relevant to this episode, but what happens next is literally breathtaking. I think it's one of the most overwhelming moments in cinema. I absolutely love it. There's a reason they call this film epic, because what happens next is just biblical in proportion. It's an experience for sure. So that's just me dipping that in. And then you get the epilogue. The narrator comes back at the end with a title that says, "So now then." And he basically comes back to remind us that, yeah, there are stories of coincidence and chance and intersections and strange things, but strange things happen all the time. And all the characters have to go through a process of forgiveness to resolve their issues. But ultimately, the rest is up to us. The film ends with one of the characters breaking the fourth wall, just looking at us at the camera and smiling for the first time in the film. It's as if to say, we can do it. So what are you going to do with your problems? It's quite nice. Yeah. I had a bit of an epiphany. I'm pretty sure this is in my top 10 films of all time. I love it. It's so good. And the bit that I'm not spoiling is just like, it is so good and so unexpected.
Well, that's a recommendation if I ever heard
one. It is really, yeah. I'll recommend it now. That's my recommendation for this week. There you go. And then the last one, sorry, it's me again. I promise Mary has the whole of the 21st century. Time Code, again, micro-budget film. It's directed by Mike Figgis, who you might have heard the name of before.
It does ring a bell.
Leaving Las Vegas, I don't know, I might have made that up. And this film... Right, how do I explain this? Right at the start of the film, before anything happens, the screen splits into 4 quadrants. And in turn, each one switches on like a TV, showing like distorted images of digits and dials and radio waves and test color patterns and sound bars. It's like we're inside a computer. And a voice eventually starts counting down from 10, and screen 1 activates. And it's a therapy session there's a woman debating whether or not she should ask for a divorce from her husband. And then after a minute or so, screen 2 fades in. There's a jealous businesswoman letting down the tyres of her girlfriend's car who's late for an audition for a film. Then screen 3 appears and you're in the reception area of said production company. And quite a naff one, but it's all a bit meta already because it's like a film within a film kind of thing. And then screen 4 and you're inside the production office, which is the epicenter of everything that happens. So now we have 4 cameras rolling simultaneously in real time with no edits for the next 90 minutes. This is all happening live, not live to us, but live in relation to each other. Yeah. Some people call it a gimmick. I think it's genius. The first movie ever told in 4 dimensions. It really is quite something. So it's described as an experimental film, which is completely fine from like an aesthetic and budget perspective. But I also think that's a bit misleading because that implies that they didn't know what the outcome was going to be of an experiment. But actually, this is a really precisely planned and executed film. So how did they do it? First of all, in terms of a script, there really wasn't one. It was mostly improvised, but with a predetermined structure. So rather than a script, Mike Figgis actually scored the film on sheet music as if there was 4 instruments, each one being the camera, and each character had a colour. And he sort of did it like that. He did it all by the timings of how it was going to play out as if it was music. So he'd have moments where he'd score where the montages would be and everyone would be together, or where there'd be a song playing which would connect everybody. And he even worked into the plot these earthquakes happen at certain moments, so the cameramen all had synchronized watches, and the film demanded that they had to be literally by the second shaking at the same time to simulate this earthquake. It's one of those things again where it's like where the universe is trying to push characters to do certain things or stay together. And throughout the film, what's clever, because you've got these 4 cameras eventually having to dance around each other and avoid each other, you've got characters that can meet, pass each other. Sometimes they pass each other and then leave with a different camera, so they travel around the screen as the film goes on. You can see both sides of a phone conversation and learn about who's actually lying about what they're saying, because you can see both sides at the same time. What else happens? You can sometimes see the character who's the subject of one camera in the background of someone else's camera, like through the window of a car or something like that. Sometimes the cameras come together and they're both looking at the same thing, like offering different angles on the same subject. And that's one of the clever things he does, because he's helping us understand the story. If a camera's not really doing much, or a character's not really doing much, it might just sort of float and just linger on something else, some other supplementary detail, like a poster or a clock or something that just adds context, so that the cameras start working in conjunction with each other as well. Just mad. But then you think, so there's 4 cameras happening at once. How on earth do I hear what I'm meant to hear? So he kind of DJs the film, like the sound levels for each one dip in and out slightly so that you can focus on each one. But ultimately, it's only a recommended viewing, because you can still kind of hear the other stories. If you wanted to, you could listen in on another one. It's definitely an experience. And obviously it's emblematic of this era again, where technology that's designed to connect people is having the polar opposite effect. It actually corrupts and disconnects them throughout the film, because it allows them to cheat and spy and eavesdrop. Funnily, that's also what we're doing as an audience watching it. It's really intrusive. There's no privacy. There's this paranoid feeling again that you get with these films. And I think that's kind of all I'll say. It's made for repeat viewings, as a lot of these films are. And it's so in your face that you can't ever be immersed in it. So you can only ever be present as well and apply things to yourself. Very clever. It's a bit like a Zoom call, which is great for linking into the 21st century, which is our last era. We're talking internet.
Technology.
The world is now globalized. We get that. People don't have to be in the same space anymore necessarily.
Absolutely.
Someone I was reading about called it hyperlink cinema, because it's like we're clicking between web pages and tabs, and windows are all opening everywhere, and that's how we go through the film. That's how we experience it. And blockbusters and art house films are kind of leveling out. You can kind of have a bit of both. You can have big budgets and stylistic choices. So
So we're gonna start with 2003's Love Actually, which probably most people have seen. It's probably the best way to familiarize yourself with a multi-narrative film in such an enjoyable way. Most people will have seen it already and just not really kind of clicked on exactly what it is and what it's doing. Love Actually again simplifies everything. So yes, there's all this going on. Technology is a huge part of it, but at the very center of this, it's all about the people. And love, obviously, from the title, is the main theme here. So those who have it, those who've lost it, those who are searching for it. We see all of this in the lead up to Christmas, and all the different forms that love takes, which is what makes it so lovely. It's filled with people that you'll know: Emma Thompson, Alan Rickman, Colin Firth, Rowan Atkinson, Bill Nighy. It's like a cast to die for.
So good.
I didn't rewatch it for this. I only watch it at Christmas, so I didn't rewatch it, but I know it so well. It was so easy to pick out examples of what they did with this film. So characters are key here because it's all, like I said, it's all about the people. So characters meet, some know each other, some we only see the connections towards the end. So you've got Emma Thompson's brother is Hugh Grant, the Prime Minister, who falls in love with Natalie, his secretary, who they meet at the school at the end, and Alan Rickman and Emma Thompson are there, and they are friends with Liam Neeson, whose wife died, who's got a stepson who's fallen in love with a girl. They go to the airport at the end and get help from Rowan Atkinson. They're watching the TV with Bill Nighy on it. It's all the connections are everywhere.
So it's just a web, isn't it? It's a web of,
it is,
of
absolutely. I mean, in terms of plot structure as well, again, it's quite simple. You're shown the weeks up to Christmas, 5 weeks to Christmas, 4 weeks to Christmas, through the text on the screen, and you are following a normal narrative structure. In that time frame, we're just going closer and closer to Christmas, and we skip from story to story. So we're seeing different characters and what they're going through, and it is very simple in that respect. I think, again, there's certain objects even that link characters together. So, for instance, the necklace. So Alan Rickman's contemplating an affair with his secretary at work, and he goes to the shopping centre and he buys the necklace from Rowan Atkinson, who's selling the necklace, and then his wife Emma Thompson finds the necklace, and then later on you see the necklace with the secretary. So there are like links through objects and things like that. The soundtrack, again, is something that connects. So Bill Nighy's character is bringing out a Christmas single, a remake of Love Is All Around by Wet Wet Wet. And it's awful.
I like it.
Christmas is all around, but you see the development of that. Is he going to make Christmas number one? You know, all this kind of thing, and you see how that is connected to people because it's in the background of everything that's going on. He's doing interviews with people which are on the telly, and the people are watching the telly. Towards the end, spoiler, he gets number one, and he said he would play naked. If he got to number
live
one,
TV.
On live TV. So the telly is on, people are watching. It's something that characters can see and witness. So if, for instance, in the airport, it's what helps one of the other characters, Sam, get to where he wants to be because everybody's watching Bill Nighy's single on the telly. But I think a big one, the big one for this one, and it'll play into the next film as well because of where we are in time, and it's even more so now, is technology. So TV, obviously, like I've said, is a big part of it. Bill Nighy's seen on the TV throughout the film. Hugh Grant's Prime Minister, his big speech is seen on the TV, and then phones connect the characters. So Emma Thompson speaks to Liam Neeson on the phone. You've got Alan Rickman speaking to his secretary on the phone, connections. You've even got one character, Laura Linney, who, oh my God, she just does not get her just desserts in this. It's not fair. That's my one issue with the film. And her entire life is interacting on the phone with her brother who's got a mental illness and needs looking after, and that's her entire story, is this phone and that bloody ringtone. So technology is this huge part of it.
The great thing about the technology is it's a story element, but it's also the link, especially with Bill Nye, because he'll be on the radio and the sound transfers into a radio, and whoever's listening to it, that's the story that you then go with. So it's like, it's not just that they see it, it's that it propels forwards as well.
Absolutely, and it connects these characters together. But again, it all comes down to the people. It's all about that theme of love, and you just play that out into the end. But it's lovely because you see, as it plays out, you see each of those stories getting their ending. All coming together and finalising at the end. It's a lovely film. It's really clever as well, and you see towards the end as well other characters that know each other. That you didn't know
it wasn't
knew
important
each other
to know
until
about, but
until the very, you're like, oh, they know each other. It's very clever.
The very last thing you see, and obviously the first thing as well, again, prologue, epilogue, and a narrator with Hugh Grant. Not starting on any of the characters, but starting looking at Heathrow Airport, the ordinary people, and that's how you leave the film as well.
It's very profound. It was after 9/11, wasn't it? Things like that, and people getting back together, seeing their loved ones, and it is profound. It's lovely that message it leaves you with.
We had to put this example in the episode really because rom-coms, if anything, of the genre that have really run with this, especially this century.
This is the best one.
Absolutely,
without a doubt, the best one.
100% agree.
And the very last one we're going to talk about is Contagion. Now, this film came out. It was about 10 years ago, wasn't it? It's 2011, I think.
2011, yeah.
Yeah. But last year was like the number one film that was being watched, obviously, with the pandemic and everything. I do not know what is wrong with people. I was watching this, I was thinking,
on it at the
I was
time.
like, what the hell? Even watching it, I watched it a few nights ago, and even now, as we're kind of getting towards the end of the pandemic, it was like watching a horror film. It was horrendous.
And a documentary.
It was horrendous. It was. I found it really scary.
It's
really
a frightening film.
I was really unsettled. I've started overly using hand sanitizer again after watching that film.
But isn't that a great indication that the film has worked?
Oh,
in terms of its thematic and its parable nature.
And the mirror image from what we've just been through is what makes it so scary. But why people were watching it last year while we were going through it, I have absolutely no idea. Oh, I have no idea. So straight away with this film, you are hyper aware of objects and surfaces. People then touching those objects, those surfaces, public places, all the people coming into contact with these infected people. It's just that one person, and you're just like, oh my God, the people, all of the people, it's cause and effect seen immediately, basically. Cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. These people touching this, then touching them, then going here. Being surrounded by these people, those people are then going to this. It's nightmarish.
Yeah, a virus is the perfect. It's not perfect. Sorry, it's the perfect vehicle for showing cause and effect.
Yeah,
in a multi-narrative film, it is viral. The whole thing is viral.
And this is on a global scale. This film, so places are introduced where characters are situated. So how many people live in those places as well gives a perspective, the scale of the thing.
It's like the internet as well, isn't it? It's that extra information. Love Actually is the same with the time updates of how far away you are from Christmas.
Yeah, and again, this is the same. This is how many days into the virus are you? Day 5, day 100. It's taking you through that, and that's the plot structure. So you're following, again, a simple narrative. You're just following that time across and seeing what's happening through those stages of time. You see meetings between characters, but I have to say, in this particular film, it's a lot less. The characters themselves don't rub up against each other as much. They connect mostly through technology. So it's over the phone mostly, if they interact at all. It's completely 21st century. It is technology, 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 phones, TV, computers, mass information quickly spreads as faster than a virus.
Yeah, the tagline for this is "Nothing spreads like fear."
Yeah.
It's not actually about the virus, really.
Exactly. And it's technology that causes the leak, that causes the panic. It's the use of technology that does that. And this film's led by technology. Creating a vaccine takes technology, passing information, contact for the characters. It's intense. Now, I'm going to give you a spoiler warning that Matt should have given me, knowing my love of Kate Winslet. Right? She does not survive this movie. And if you are a Kate Winslet fan, I think you should be prepared in advance going in.
In my defense,
I was very upset. very upset.
I haven't seen it for about 6 years, and I probably wasn't watching it for the plot when I last watched it.
I saw her get sick, and I was like, oh no. So I went out to my husband. I was like, does Kate Winslet die? And he was like, I can't remember. I was like, you're useless. I just had to go and start it again.
But didn't it make you want to wash your hands afterwards?
Oh, absolutely. I did actually. Sanitize them as well. But this, it is a scary film. It really is. But it really does show absolutely, even though it's 10 years since it's been made, we are still there. We are ruled by technology completely, and it shows the possibility of this thing happening, and we are going through it now. Obviously, this virus that they have in this film is much quicker, and it's bigger. And I would say it's that our number is a lot higher than we've had with this one. But it really is a mirror image of things that we've gone through, which is what makes it so scary, because it's like, it really is like living it.
Yeah.
It feels like you could just walk out onto the street and you're in the film, because it's so realistic to how we live now.
What did you think about the ending? Because again, the film obviously has a prologue in that it shows you virus spreading, but the ending,
it shows
takes
you the
back
very
to
beginning.
day one, which you weren't given at the beginning. You start on day 2.
Exactly how it happened. What made that spread, and it was very interesting actually.
What was the cause of the virus in your eyes? What was it?
It was that blend between the bat and the pig, obviously, which was that was element 1. But I think that shouldn't have been an issue if the human element had been done correctly, because it came down to that chef, didn't it? That chef
as well, yeah.
That chef did not wash his hands. For me, the human element was kind of a really, really big part of it.
There was another human element right at the beginning. So so Gwyneth Paltrow was patient 1.
The company she worked for,
The company she worked for was cutting down trees, which made the bat fly in the first place.
Yeah.
I just brought it back around and I was like, it's now a film about deforestation.
Yeah, we did this.
Yeah, it's our choices as humans that have caused this, and it's the universe now punishing us. That's the feeling I get from these films.
Absolutely, yeah.
So good.
It's a big thing to end on. It's a very big thing to end on.
It's one of my favourite endings from a film.
I would definitely recommend seeing it, but it is scary, and it is filled with human elements as well, human moments.
Lots of stories of family as well as of scientists.
Small moments, that show the human element.
And another massive cast: Matt Damon, Jude Law, Gwyneth Paltrow, Kate Winslet, Marion Cotillard, Lawrence Fishburne. Yeah,
it's an absolutely huge cast.
Yeah.
Huge cast. But they disappear though as well into it. They completely disappear. Because the event is so much bigger than any one person. It's too big, so they just you're not thinking about, oh well, that's Matt Damon, that's Kate Winslet. The actual events themselves, the impact on a global scale is so much bigger than any of those people.
Yeah, it's all these glamorous stars being put in this very horrible situation that you don't even see them as A-list stars anymore, or actors and actresses. It's just
completely.
Again, leveling out of people, in a different sense.
Well, yeah, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. If there's a virus, you are a person. It doesn't matter your class, It doesn't matter your race, your sexual orientation, if you are all just equal.
And that's a very nice way to round off, really. But you can see, like, of the eras that we have covered, and I guarantee it is the same back in 1916, all the way up to this film, 2011, and Cloud Atlas, which we mentioned, which was 2012, and the still films being made like this now, is that there's a very clear through line and a lineage of how the films were made and how each one takes what was introduced in the earlier one, reworks it, adds new things in depending on the context at the time, and then redistributes it out to make a comment about that time. And yeah, it just makes you think, oh, what will happen next? I don't know what will happen now we've got the internet. I don't really know what the next major thing is going to be.
Big thing,
or whether it's just going to
what's going to change the generation? What's going to change us?
Yeah, and where's the line going to be? I don't think there will be one for a very long time.
No, I don't.
It'll be some kind of robotic thing, but that's still science fiction.
It's going to have to be something that changes things on a huge scale, and I'm not sure we're anywhere near developing something like that yet.
No, not just yet. Which is why I think Cloud Atlas was like really the culmination of every single little element. Everything we've talked about today was put into Cloud Atlas, and I feel like that's why since then there's not been a notable film of that type since. There's been some, like bad ones,
but nothing
on that scale.
Yeah.
And I think it's because there needs to be the next generation in order for us to go, right, we can do something different with it now. We've got something different to say. But yeah, you can see why 9 years later I'm still going over everything and still thinking
there's so many things
new ways
to look at.
to see things.
Yeah, it is one of those type of film that you can watch again and again and you'll see something different in it every time. I think a lot of films are like that, but this one specifically, you really will see different things.
Can't really get bored of them. Well, I won't.
So
anyway,
we made it. We made it to the end.
Yay.
So you're sticking with your recommendation of Magnolia.
Yeah, this week, Magnolia. Yeah. If you've not seen Magnolia, it's fantastic. It's the closest you can get to a spiritual experience in a film.
I'm going off topic as per. I'm I never do follow the trend, do I? I do my own thing. So my film for this week, my recommendation is To Kill a Mockingbird. Going all the way back to the 60s, Gregory Peck at his very best. I've just reread the book, which I would also recommend reading because it is so important. That book, it really is. I think
I've
everybody
never read or watched it.
I think everybody should read it, and it is an absolutely fantastic example of a perfect adaptation from book to film.
Okay.
It is fantastically done. It's obviously all about race. It's set in the 1930s in the South, and it's all told from the perspective of a young child, and narrated, and it's perfect, absolutely perfect. I rewatched it and I just remembered just how fantastic it is. Thank you
for listening. Cloud Atlas, if you're interested, very, very in depth.
Yeah, we really did our homework for that one.
But otherwise,
what have we got up next?
What have we got up next? Oh yeah, we started looking at the X-Men series at the end of last year, middle of last year, and we did the original trilogy. But obviously, there are 4 prequels that are the same but different. And yeah, we're going to round off that series with looking at the X-Men prequels. So First Class, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, and Dark Phoenix, and our take on what went right and what went wrong along the way. Mary, you've not seen Dark Phoenix, have you?
No, I haven't. So I've got to pep myself up for that one.
Yeah, interesting topic, and you'll find out then. So yeah, don't bother emailing us. You can find us on social media. Cine Chat Podcast. It's nice and easy. But until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye for me.
Woo-hoo.